Welcome
Hello.
and good morning, everybody, to a very
Hello.
special episode of Roll to Cast One Shot, because this is the shot of coffee that you have with you while you sit back and relax and listen to us talk just about GMing and TTRPGs in general. So unfortunately, our regularly scheduled Roll to Cast One Shot, due to circumstances outside of our control, we're not going to be able to do that this week. We are going to postpone it to a weekend very, very soon. But in lieu of that, we still wanted to do a stream, and we wanted to not just be like, Zac, go away. So
we got him out here for nothing.
Yeah, I came all the way out here.
Yeah, we got to use him for each penny. Squeeze every penny out of him.
Who are we and what do we do? If you're new to the channel, this will just be like a nice way to get to know us. And if you're old to the channel, or if you're coming from elsewhere, and like the podcast, for example, just a bit of a deep dive into us and who we are and how we game and why we game and all that kind of good stuff. So first of all, we'll just kind of quickly go around the table and say who we are and any socials or anything we got going on, and maybe also we'll get onto that hard-hitting question afterwards. So first of all, Ellen, who are you? What are you doing? And where can we find you?
Hey, I'm Ellen. You can find me mainly at Roll to Cast, funnily enough. But I guess in my other lives, I am a drag king, playwright, and just a man about town. Just a funky little guy around town, whirling my life through so many TTRPGs that I'll play once and then never get the chance to play again.
Yes.
That's me.
Yes.
Phil, who are you? What are you doing? And what you got going on?
Hi, I'm Phil, or Scruff. That's SKKRUFF on both Twitter and very occasionally Twitch. I am a disability dad, GM, and sometimes TTRPG writer. I do a bunch of seasons here on Rotorcast as well. Cyberpunk, Witcher, and currently Dune.
Adventures.
How you doing?
I'm
and-
Dune okay.
Before we roll over to our guest, just an important little context as well for this stream. So currently, Rollcast, we're embroiled in our live show at the Adelaide Fringe, and we actually opened up last night with a continuation of the Avatar Legends season. And part of that live show is that we happen to have a drinking aspect where the audience has the ability to hinder mostly and otherwise affect our players throughout the game, and they chose to engage in that liberally. So we're a little bit rough around the edges this morning. So that's where we sit. So if we seem a little bit sluggish and slow compared to our guest, also he's just a charming motherfucker, but also he hasn't been doing what we did last night, and nor should
Says
he.
you think.
Says he, oh, fuck.
He played his own drinking game, his own
He's
podcast
just much
drinking
better.
game,
He's just much better at cleaning up than we are.
Yeah, yeah.
away from Sydney.
Yeah, speaking of which, Zach, who are you? What you got going on, and what are you doing?
Hello. I'm sitting. I'm looking forward to a fun, very loose chat. And I do. I'm on YouTube. I'm on TikTok. I do silly D&D stories. And if you've ever when you turn off all the lights to go to bed, and then you have to walk through your dark house, and you hear like a weird noise that you're like, "That's never happened in my house before."
That's my
I
dad.
did that. That was me.
Thank you,
I sneak
Zach,
into your
for
house at night.
continually driving down the property market.
It's not
Yes.
a problem. Not a
You
problem.
sound a lot like a possum in my roof, so
Yeah.
well done.
I do. I practice my possum a lot.
So that's what giant sounds like.
Yeah. It's the
possums.
same sound.
As a quick aside, my brother, eldest brother, years ago, he was talking about he was up at his grandparents, my grandparents' place up in the Adelaide Hills, which is a really kind of remote area of Adelaide where there's a lot of wildlife and such, and they were in kind of the little basement area, and they hear like this person breaking and entering to the house, and it's got this like ungodly noises and racket, and they're like dressed in just their boxer shorts and a t-shirt, and they quickly find like the weapon of choice. Like one of them had like a wooden baseball bat, and one just found like a loose pipe, and they run out the back of the house trying to find this intruder before realizing that it's just a fucking possum that has gotten away into their roost and is just making the sounds of the devil.
They are.
inside.
Yeah, they're pretty horrible.
They're the
One of the
worst.
worst sounds I ever heard is just two koalas going at each other. I literally thought someone was dying and being attacked, and I was like on a hike with no one around, and I was like, am I about to stumble into a horrible, horrible scene?
It's the
And I did,
doctors.
but it was just two koalas attacking each other, so.
Which
Sorry.
is horrible, but that's
Yeah.
fine.
Speaking of horrible, should we talk about GMing?
Absolutely. So first of all, the kind of thing that all of us have in common in here is we have a pretty big history at this point with GMing and TTRPGs. And so first of all, this is going to be like more of a roundtable thing. So feel like you can just jump in and chat whenever you have someone to say. Or even if you don't, you just like the sound of your own voice. That's totally fine too. That's what we're here for. So first of all, in terms of GMing, how is it that people got into GMing? And I mean, like, what actually, like, not what had you start off and doing the idea of TTRPGs, but what kept you coming back? And what in particular, like, drew you to the idea of doing it as more than oh yeah, maybe I'll check it out, maybe I'll do it once, but actually go, no, I actually enjoy this and I want to keep doing it.
Like, when
And
did
what
it
was
click
that?
for you?
Yeah, that's kind of a thing that I'll throw out to people if anyone has an answer to that.
I think I was like a denied theater kid. Like I wanted to be a theater kid and I didn't get to be.
That's so rough, dude, because if you can't get in with the theater
I
kids...
know, right?
ooh.
Ooh. Well, we
No
had a
hope.
drama class in high school, but then it stopped. Like there wasn't enough people that joined it
Oh
for
no.
them to carry it on into like year 10 and do like electives. So I had to. I couldn't do drama. And so and then I went to uni and blah blah blah. And then getting back into D&D, I was like, oh yeah, I really like this. I really like the opportunity to like, because there's no I say this all the time, but there's no other like if you're just a person working a job and going about your life, there's not a lot of outlet for creativity in terms of like creative writing, performance, improv, all of that. There's not a lot
Nothing
of
so low stakes, I think.
yeah, nothing low stakes. Like you either have to be like, okay, I'm going to write a novel, or I'm going to like do like, and you have to either go for a massive audience or just not do it. But
There is that
D&D
kind of
this great middle
fanfic
ground.
space, which is maybe a little bit
Yeah, true.
in there, but obviously not everyone wants to type, right?
Yeah, and for like a low stakes, like your audience is your friends, and you all get to put in exactly the amount that you're comfortable putting in, especially for DMs where you're like, I'm really into map making. I can just make maps and do that if I'm interested in that, and it's great. So that's what kind of got me into it. It was just like, oh, I can suddenly have an outlet for all the silly voices I do, and like improv and acting and writing and like constructing a narrative and stuff. So yeah.
I mean, I wore fangs to a retail job a few times. I don't know. That was pretty creative.
You did get fired immediately, but
No, I wish I had.
I wish I had.
Like when you're saying like all the things that you can't do in a normal job, sometimes I would switch accents between customers. I would like just like because they were like, you can't put on your own, you can't like put on an aux cord to like no radio station, so I just like do little a cappella tunes to myself.
You were definitely
It was
like
nuts.
warming yourself up for roleplay, I guess, without knowing it. Practicing.
You're revving the engine.
I think it's kind of weird because for me it was a much less organic process. It was kind of born out of necessity, which is we fucking started Roll to Cast and we decided that all of us were going to be GMing. That we would
Hated
rotate
that
the
decision.
Yeah. So, but I remember my first GMing experience was for Phil because at that point we were still doing a casual D&D game. I was like, hey, I found this little one-shot called The Wild Sheep Chase. Can I try and just do it for you guys and see how it goes? In that exact voice. So I did it for Phil and the others and did like a little 2-hour one-shot in preparation for an entire season of Roll to Cast. Like, you know, that's a small gap. But yeah, I think because now I've GM'd casually for my Starfinder group and a long-running D&D group that's gone for about 2 years now. And I think what's kind of fascinated me about GMing is trying to find what my GMing style is and constantly refining that and figuring out what's best practice for me. Because I've done, like I was going to do today, the most loosest, goosiest fucking prep for a session ever and seen it just crash and burn in flames or weirdly go great. And that's like hard for me to like kind of come to terms with. I'm going, so wait, should I be doing this or should I not be doing this?
Oh, it's per game, isn't it?
Yeah, or I'll spend hours upon hours just fine-tuning this 3-hour session that I'm going to do, and again to varying results. And I think it fascinates me how I can have such different approaches to GMing and still come in with mixed varying results. And that's fun to me to see like how that kind of eventuates. And I like the creative process of navigating that, I think.
I feel like it's to me, GMing is a bit like kind of improv or a lot of that kind of, performance mindset where it is a bit of a sport or it has that endurance quality to it where it's like you can do so much out there, but like once you kind of get ready and start the ball rolling and performing, or collaborating with your fellow players, it is generally like whatever idea we commit to, that's what we run with. And that could be anything. Like it could be what we've prepped for, but it could also be something completely new and random. And you just have to like pick up the baton and run with it.
I've actually just gotten really good at making the rails appealing to my groups. That's how I get around it. It's like I make it.
There's lots of presents and candy over here.
Yeah, I make it. I mean, what I do is I try and make it personal to people, so I give them a really good reason to want to do the stuff that I've prepped, basically.
Yes.
and so that's kind of how I navigate that. Is
Rails. Yeah, I
is
think
I
if you
say,
have, you know,
look,
the carrot
these
and
are
stick,
really
right?
cool rails. Sorry.
Yeah.
You have a very good knowledge, though. I mean, based on your studies, Phil, of kind of story construction and like, you know, just like literally the structure of how a story will work. And when you build it around those kind of
Yeah.
frameworks, it is very appealing to like, I want to tell the hero's journey. I want to
Yeah.
tell a story of a Byronic hero crashing and burning, and players do tend to, you know, want to make good stories for
Follow like a
themselves.
story. Yeah, I mean, my background's English lit, and then obviously have my diploma in acting as well. And combining those into two is this kind of, it's like a nice GM kind of
With the powers combined, yeah.
power coupling. So for me, it was when during fourth ed. Fifth ed hadn't even come out yet, and I was running a D&D group for the people. I was a part of a hospitality team at a venue, and we were like playing D&D in our spare time in the venue because they had like a big hall that we could use.
Hell yeah.
And what I did was like a fantasy reflection of, you know, what we were doing, which is a fun thing to do with D&D, I think. You
gotta always have hospitality, no matter what world you're living in.
There was like a rival team of heroes that were just from another pub in town. And
You used to do Animal House?
we did. So I think the one that kind of clicked it for me was we did. I basically had them run security for a fantasy concert. So I think Wild Stallions were there, and they were centaurs.
Nice.
That sort of thing. References and
amazing.
And
Imagine Dragons were there.
yeah. And what ended up was that it was this really nice single self-contained session with, you know, starting out running security, it all going wrong, the crowd rioting because there was like an indie band in between all these heavy rockers, so they had to like set up an impromptu concert and outside and power up the amps with magic. And at the end, they were all like, oh, you know, how we are at the end of the night against the bar, like sipping their drinks, having like kept everything cool. And for me, that was like having that self-contained story work out, have everyone really enjoy the shape of it and be like, oh, that was so satisfying. That for me, I was like, I love this role. I love the GMing part of it. I love, you know, giving everyone like that satisfying shape. Yeah, for me that was it when I was like, yeah, I'll always GM.
I was going to pivot to a different question, but just because there was a question that just came into the chat, I'm gonna pop it here because we have a question from I'm really sorry if I butcher this name, Anshar. And they have asked, because they're a DM since 1989, and they say, question for you guys, what's something they had in earlier editions of D&D that you miss and hope is re-released? Now, for
Imagine
me,
if Chris was here.
right?
He loves fourth ed, yeah.
I'm actually out of this question, really, because I know that Chris actually introduced me through 4th ed, but I don't really remember a whole bunch from it, so my experience is pretty much exclusively to 5th edition in terms of D&D. But if anyone else has an answer to the question.
I do find it quite funny since like it's so funny how you can be like, oh yeah, I've been a DM for ages, like how long? Like 5 years, which is a long time. Like I that's how long I've DM'd. Maybe probably actually longer than that now. Like maybe like 7 or 8 times a flat circle. But then you're like, and then you talk to other people like, yeah, I've DM'd for ages, and you're like, how long? And they're like 30 years. And you're like, oh, okay.
Your entire life.
I was DMing watching the moon landing. Like,
And you're like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
But in terms of earlier, I don't know a huge amount about the earlier editions. I have seen some really interesting ways of including earlier edition stuff. So I've just been listening to the Dungeons and Daddies podcast, and they had this dungeon where it was a first edition dungeon. So
their
Was it the
characters
Tomb of Horrors?
converted into first edition characters.
Yeah, which was really cool. Especially because first edition is so funny in that like one of the classes is just elf. Like
yeah, there's like 3 classes, I think.
Elf, magic user, Fighting Man. I love that it's
Fighting
needlessly
Man, that's
gendered-
right.
gendered.
Wow,
Not
that's
even
like the
fighting.
bathrooms that.
Yeah.
I
Um,
guess I use elf. Shit, I don't know.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that'd be
Uh,
great. If you go, I'm gonna have a fantasy bar where the bathrooms are just
Elf.
the original first edition.
the one
um,
person ashamedly using centaur. Ah.
Um,
You don't want to know.
But the other thing I saw recently is like interesting ways to add older edition like spells and rules into current edition where it makes sense as like a meta kind of not joke, but like a meta kind of narrative that influences how the players react with the world. So I saw someone saying like, "Oh, I brought a lich into my game, and the lich, when they cast spells, they were like spells from earlier editions. They're how it worked
Because
from earlier
they're old as shit.
They're
That's
old
Nice.
as
pretty-
shit.
pretty
So when they
smart.
cast
That's
Stone
dope.
Skin, it was like they were immune to all damage instead of just it being resistant, and like
Ah.
a whole bunch of
That's
stuff.
so cool.
It was really, really cool.
Do you think
Um,
like the D&D universe works the same as like Apple, where like it's not like,
not
it
compatible.
doesn't change from editions in the world that they're living in, but they just get an update? It's like
Yeah.
a wizard
gotta
trying to use their spells, and they're like,
new ones come
"Ah,
out and like
shit, I
New-
gotta
new
agree to the
proprietary
terms
charging.
of service."
that
What do you
could
mean
be
it doesn't
fun. Like,
recharge
that's
at
a good way to do it as
sunrise?
Yeah.
well.
You have to like make your wizard like do a long rest to update.
Yeah. And like the mages guild, like you at some point you go into the mages guild and look through their archives and you find like spell scrolls of like older spells.
You're like, I gotta have an older system.
Powerful.
I gotta have an older system to run this on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get your DOS box out. So I'm
Oh,
gonna
that's
cheat
so
and
dumb.
not answer with D&D. So
Great.
two games that I played that got updated are Cyberpunk 2020 into Cyberpunk
I was
Red.
wondering if you're gonna bring up Cyberpunk.
So Cyberpunk 2020 is from the 80s and Cyberpunk Red is from like a couple of years ago. So obviously it's been updated with a lot of modern sensibilities. But this something I kind of miss from 2020 was basically whenever you got hit, you could go down. Like not necessarily die, but you could get stunned. You could get like a heavy punch, any kind of glancing blow with a bullet, you could be out of the fight. And I really like that idea because in reality, I know obviously we're playing a game, but in reality, you know, get hit by a bullet, maybe it's not going to kill you, but it could like totally just floor you and
Mess up the
remove.
day.
Yeah, and it just makes the players extremely like it changes the tenor of the game, so that combat is such a careful choice, and bushwhacking people and like having the drop on them is super duper important because you can even just go down from a punch. Someone could gut punch you, and you just like oh, and it just
It's also
changed.
just like headshots are just like game over. Game over, man. You
Yeah.
got shot in the head. What are you gonna do about that?
Yeah.
Like it's
Right.
like that's it.
The armor rules are much like they're not as gameable, and the damage rules are much more harsh. And I kind of miss that from 2020. Red feels a little bit more video gamey in that sense that you can shoot people into your meat points. Their meat points run out, and then you win. And I like it just being a bit more simulation-y, and just like. Ugh. So that's what I miss. You can tell I like to kill
I
my
never read
players.
anything old ever, so I wouldn't know. I've never. I think my introduction to D&D was 5e. I guess we all
Which is
had
like
the
10 years
experience
old
of
now,
going
so.
from 2020 to Cyberpunk Red, and yeah, definitely felt that jump of, oh shit, like these feel a lot more like main characters in Red, whereas in Cyberpunk 2020 there is a joy in being like, I'm a dude, I'm a guy who's just walking around Night City trying not to get shot in the back of the head, and it's really hard actually. It's quite
Pretty
hard.
scary.
There was a
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a question I was going to ask before this. I think it's probably a good time to bring it up in terms of like looking at your GMing and where we've all talked about kind of how we like cultivate the way that we GM and the way that's kind of works for us. in kind of your years of learning to GM and learning what works, what have you kind of assessed is like a big strength that you have as a GM? And conversely, what do you kind of identify as a weakness? And if you've identified that, how do you kind of go about either hiding it or putting a focus on that? Like, do you look to kind of like really hone into it to turn that weakness into a bit more of a strength, or do you just kind of avoid that aspect as much as possible? So yeah, but strength and weakness is kind of what I'm asking.
I think, I mean, it's so easy. I mean, you guys will find this as well when you record all your sessions to hear the exact things that you hate about the way that you perform something. When I'm DMing, I just say ums and ahs a lot,
Yeah.
and it frustrates me to no end. Especially because the thing I like really value in or respect in like the best DMs who I think are like Brendan Lee Mulligan or something like that. Their cadence and their description when they fall into that is just flawless. Like
It's infuriating.
they don't falter. It just comes out in a thing. And so when I hear myself being like, again, god damn it, it's so easy to be annoyed by that. But I think definitely like there's been different things that I've thought are my weaknesses over time, and it's something that I like. I had an interesting thing the other day. It's like your skill at something and your critical eye for something, that same thing develops at different levels. So
Yeah, right.
you can be good at something, but your critical eye is a little bit ahead of you, and so you're like, and sometimes it's always ahead of you, and sometimes and it means that you're always kind of like looking at yourself with a critical eye, even though you're getting better.
You suddenly understand what excellent looks like, and you're like, oh.
Yeah, right. And but then sometimes you jump up in your skill level and you go, oh, I'm a genius.
It's happening.
You're above your critical eye a little bit. But I think the kind of cadence thing, and like for a while I was really terrible at describing the physical situation that my players were in. So it'd get like, which would be really annoying because it was a purely audio podcast. I just kind of assume a lot of information was just kind of beamed from my frontal lobe to my players.
Zach, where actually are we?
Yes.
Like, a room. You know that kind of room that you're in? Anyway, that kind of room.
You've seen rooms.
You never described a room. We didn't even walk through a door. How the fuck are we in a room?
Stop questioning. I've got pacing.
I think Zach's weakness as a GM is he tells us to shut up all the time.
Shut up. It's my turn.
My turn. Me.
Me. I think one of the strengths I've tried to lean into more and more, and the kind of advice I always give new DMs is like, trust yourself to improv. Like some of the best sessions I've ever had is where I've improved massive world like defining choices about the lore and setting that I now have to like fucking run with for the rest of the campaign, but have made the players so engaged and so excited.
Players can't interact with lore until it
changes because of their decisions.
Yeah, exactly. So you can't play the lore. So I think that's something that I learned as well. It's like you can invent a lot of background stuff, and that can help you kind of feel grounded as a DM. But until it actually plays out, like its value is limited, I feel. And when the players intersect with it and start, as you say, changing it and doing something with it, that's when it kind of comes to life, I think. And I think a lot of GMs maybe get a bit bogged down in world building, and they have this whole homebrew thing happening. And actually some of the details can be wishy-washy until the players hit them, and then they can solidify both for you and for them.
It's literally something that I've incorporated in my D&D game currently, is that I've created this homebrew world that has a central premise that's basically just a massive fucking MacGuffin machine. And what I've done is a lot of the tangibles of it, or the nitty-gritty, like I've got this like end goal in mind ages down. Everything around that is really kind of like going to be determined by how my players engage with it, because I'm waiting for them to give ideas and see how they wish to engage with it and know like which parts of the lore that I should focus on and should kind of tease out. So just giving them a kind of a wide scope to see where they actually go, for me, that's a benefit of a homebrew world, is I can go, right, here's the bare basics, and it looks like everything. It's really not. And see where they go and where I need to then put my effort into and kind of expand out based on what clearly interests them, is kind of the way I'm about it.
I feel like role-playing games, I mean, obviously most of us come from a theater background, but the parameters have already been set. So, like, once you get on the tracks, it keeps a rolling. But to truly, like, make the medium fit, it has to be tangible and it has to be all there live being constructed together. And I feel really blessed that like I began with like a game like Kids on Bikes as a GM, because it is so collaborative. And like even that, I think I was so scared that I over prepped and I took some of that usual agency away. Again, making something for Roll to Cast is like different than just playing it, because we need to have decisions made in advance and blah blah blue. But like, if a story can't have a player's fingerprints all over it, it doesn't quite work. And I feel like the best thing I could have, like, I continue to like try and integrate, because I always feel like that makes it hit most home, is like have like everyone, hey, it's not just me, I'm like, you know, like we're all the batteries powering this thing. So it's not just like up to me. And what's going to be more impactful than, you know, me describing an ooky spooky dream that is devoid of anything, versus me asking the player, like, what is the thing you fear most?
Yeah.
Well, and why was that in your dream? Yeah. You know, like that always helps you, because then again, it's got that personal connection back from the player. And the thing of, we all want to make those stories. We want to tell those stories inherently. We've all got skin in the game. So like just hitting it back to the players and everyone, like, you know, working as a team, I always feel helps make a really impactful story.
It's such a good technique. Like if you have downtime in your game, and most games have at least a little bit of downtime, is to just kind of throw it back and throw it open. Sometimes you need to give it a little bit of guidance. It's like, okay, you have a chance to explore this area. What is your character looking for? So you're not just saying, what are you guys doing? You have to wait here on the street for 3 hours. Like, do you get bored? Like, what do you do? Can you tell me about someone you see walking down the street or something? And then you can just give a little space for them to create in. And then you can sit back and you know, frantically look at your notes, or just relax for a second. So it has a double purpose, I think. But it gives people that sense of texture to both the characters and the world, and their own agency in building it. I love building in those moments.
What's interesting about that as well is sometimes I find I'm working with groups where where they fit on the spectrum of loving roleplay moments and not wanting to engage with that at all, which is completely valid, can swing wildly player to player in your own game. So I find there's a very nuanced balance that you have to take between giving them space to roleplay and knowing that there are some people at the table that really just want to hit something on the head. And that's kind of like, they don't want to be like, what does my character think?
I would like to roll the maths rock now, please.
Can I roll? Can I roll to determine what my character thinks? Is that fine?
And sometimes it's finding ways to challenge that player that's not just like forcing them into more roleplay situations, but
not bamboozling them,
but forcing them into like action sequences that aren't combat, which is D&D is really bad for, to be honest. But,
a lot of games are quite bad for it.
Yeah.
That's fun. I also think one of the big changes I've made of my DMing style, and this is for like if you're a DM in the chat and like you've kind of got yourself to a point where you kind of know your own style. I had this big pivot point where I went from imagining my sessions as like a path through a thing, and like I've got to like get my players through this way, and more about I am setting up a situation, a very a complex problem for them to solve, and maybe that's like a combat, maybe that's like an action sequence, maybe that's a social situation, but thinking of it as like, this is a big problem, and I don't have to come up with a solution because my players have 4 brains between
all
them,
their tools
even
and
if they
stuff.
only
Yeah.
used a third of them.
Name names.
Joel
this is-
Rennie.
I think this is why one of my go-to situations is the heist, right? And
You love
it's
a
very
heist.
it's
Yeah.
very
Love a good heist.
cyberpunk appropriate for a start, but also a heist is just a problem. It's a building, it's a vault, it's a something, and it's like, this is where it is. This is who's guarding it. This is what happens when you trip security. That's all I have to know. Then it's open to the players, and I think it's the best way of handling set pieces, I think.
I think I lean on a mystery, perhaps maybe too often, but like in all of my there is just the set, like, because I'm like, well, most players are naturally curious anyway, and sometimes like maybe too curious, and you're just trying to run a standard kind of like just a very standard game. It might be like just a dungeon crawler, and they're like, what does that do? Quick, I open the door with my foot.
You describe
from...
that fountain. The fountain is going to come back. You got to
Yeah.
figure out what the thing is with the fountain.
It's
And
like they think everything's a Chekhov's gun, just lying around. You're like, sometimes I just want to set the scene, my guy. But like because they are just naturally curious, if you just put like a little seed of a mystery, generally that is like enough to kind of keep breadcrumbing through. Because be like, what's happening? What's happening?
I think I realize I rely on heightened characters, really big kind of bombastic settings and things that give a sense of grandiosity, but also enables characters to really like lean into their characters as like an extensive expression of themselves. So that's why I lean to things like Pulp Cthulhu and Starfinder, which is just big, giant, sweeping science fantasy, or like I'm doing currently, a D&D 5th ed with no strings attached. Is you want to play that thing, you want to use that spell, you want to do it, whatever gets you engaged in your character, and just implementing this style of, I'm not going to put restrictions on what book you can get something from, because I know in the past I've gone, look, core book only, because I don't want to have to like look through 10,000 books to find something. But this time I'm like, just run it by me afterwards, and if you're happy with it, I'll probably be happy with it, as long as it's not like, I have the ability to kill someone by looking at them, as long as it's official. But yeah, so it's a thing of going, right, how do I get my players excited about their characters without me having to try and get them excited? Like, if they're coming into the session and the game excited to play their character and show off their skill and show off, like, their funny accent or whatever, that's half the work done, because they're going to just react in the moment to whatever I put towards them.
We've got a question about murder hobos from Captain Rail. Would you like me to read it out loud?
Please do.
I want to ask the other GMs, how do you detour your players from murder hoboing? I use milestone leveling up, and that seems to work for me. I don't know. I don't know that we've really had any murder hobos thus far.
I think it's something that comes down to setting expectations, like having a good session 0 and everyone knowing what kind of campaign they're in for. So if you let people know ahead of time that if you go around murdering everyone, the game world will react and and hunt you down or whatever, that kind of tempers people's expectations. But also the players can themselves be like, someone's like, I like combat, but I want to get into some intrigue and politics and stuff as well. And so they've already primed the other players for you that and I think as social creatures, we don't want to just overrule everyone that we're in the group with. And so instead of you being from the top down and saying, we're not going to have that in my game, you have the players say what they want. And hey, if you get a bunch of players together and they're like, we want to kill everything, well then murder hoboing's not a problem. It's what like people want to do. That's what they want.
That's most cyberpunk games, right?
Yeah.
Where you're like, our job is to kind of just kill a lot of people. I don't know what you want from me.
I think there's a thing of like, someone in chat is like, punish them, which like is an option. But if it's all your players who are all like
Mm,
constantly fighting, be like, if that's what the players want, and it's not a huge detour from what you want to do in a movie, make a very action heavy, combat heavy campaign where they're
Give them a
mercenaries
war
and
or
they've been
something,
thrown
you know.
into a war and they have to
Yeah.
fight their way out. And then you can start, like, once they get their feel of what they want, then you can start introducing other elements, kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between like a murder hobo player and a murder hobo party. Because if it's the
Yes.
entire party, that's the expectation of what the game is. And I think that's why, session zeros are so important. Because I know I've said specifically to teams before, hey, like just be aware, you can interact with the world however you want. There are other ways. In fact, there are always other ways. Like everything that you encounter, I try and make that it can be solved non-confrontationally. Like there is always another way. In fact, Wild Beyond the Witchlight, which I know Ellen's running at the moment, explicitly goes out of its way to tell the GM every single encounter that the players will go through can be solved without fighting. And it gives that option there. And I try and make that explicitly clear to my players. But I think also it's also very interesting in the moment how we sometimes try and make it very explicitly clear, please don't attack this person. The stakes are there, like they're a big,
Sorry, Sean.
awful, horrible bit. Yeah, that's happened before. But
Killed
also,
off an important character way too early. I'm so.
yeah, I was like,
I'm so.
what do we do? But yeah, expectation I think is a huge thing, and just kind of making the stakes clear in the moment if you can see they're going that way, or just going with it. As you, like, that's a whole like negotiation in the moment.
I think
it's so nuanced.
Because I think when people talk about a murder hobo, they're referring to like an activity or a moral stance for a character that is like not that is almost anachronistic to the world, right? Like they're acting like they just mowing through things, and if the tone of the game does not support that, then of course that is seen as like a problem. But you might be playing in Dark Heresy, where it is just like
Makes sense.
it is a war, and people are just giblets, and you just go through them, and that is totally fine. I played a really actually quite violent game of Honey Heist because at some point we were like, oh yeah, they're all bears, like
Fucking
like do you know what I mean? And it was like, yeah,
bears.
sure, like you're a bear. Why would you have a human sense of morals when these are just like walking hamburgers? Yeah, go for it. It's really about like, what is the tone of the world, and how does the world react to that? Because we don't want, like, yes, we probably influence a lot of our games with our own morals, but thinking outside of how the morals of this world operate really helps you kind of get that tone nice and consistent.
Yeah,
I think sometimes murder hoboing is also maybe like sometimes there's a bit of a reaction to like a lack of agency as well. If you don't give people enough opportunities to affect the story or the world, they're just like, well, you know what, I'm just going to attack this guy, so something happens and I can take the reins a little bit. So I think maybe sometimes it's also a symptom of that you're not giving us space to play, and that's an outlet.
I went to the zoo recently and I saw the zookeepers going around and hiding treats in the meerkat enclosure, and they would like hide things so that they had the opportunities to forage and find it. And I was like, enrichment like thing. And then I was like, I think I'm kind of an enrichment to my players. Like I'm like, it's my job to create enrichment tasks for my players.
We just
And
push
when you don't do
Zac
that,
and little treats dispense out of him occasionally. If we roll him around enough times.
And so you got to think of like your players as having different needs. And if one of them is like, I just like combat, create, and you're getting into a situation where there's going to be a lot of role play, create a separate, I mean, people are always freaking out by splitting the party. It's fine. Split the party. It's okay. Nothing bad's going to happen. You get to control you control the world. You can not, swarm them with monsters. But if there's going to be like they're in the castle and there's going to be a lot of role play ahead with the king, and you don't want them to get bored and just like start stabbing people. Maybe in their room they had an assassin come and they have to fight them off while the rest of the players are doing this, and they're finding out information that is separate to what the role play, and you can cut between them. I think that's a massive. I think my DMing style is very, I think in very like cinematic terms. And so being able to cut between at dramatic moments is a huge tool in your toolbox, and I think people should use that more. DM enrichment retreat. Yeah.
Also, we've got a weird thing happening now on Roll to
Halftime
Chat.
substitute.
Yeah, we're gonna be tagging in and out because Ellen is gotta prep for a whole nother stream.
Yes, I have our Strixhaven finale, so I'm going to be ducking on out. I'm in my sports jersey, so it feels appropriate to have a halftime substitution, swapping some players in and out. But yeah.
Yeah, Ellen,
so
is there
nice to be
anything
here.
you wanna plug or wanna say before you jump on out for all the fine folks? Or
I mean, it's just so nice to have a little kind of Sunday morning chat. So yeah, just so lovely, and so lovely to have all of you wonderful people in chat, sharing your own DM and GMing experience. So that's really lovely. If this is finished and there's still time, hop over to Strixhaven, where I'll be playing as a dumb centaur jock.
What channel
Not
is
too
that on?
dissimilar from my actual. Sorry.
What channel is that on? Where can they go?
That's Winter's Tales. Yes, you can find me in a whole bunch of wonderful femme performers. And I didn't plug this at the beginning, but I too have been getting on the TikTok to horrible results. Each TikTok more deranged than the last. So please follow me at that. That's EllieBean96, which, fun fact, was my old roller derby name.
hey.
There we go. All right, but I should peace out, and we will have the wonderful Chris joining us instead. So I'm
there's gonna be a brief.
There's gonna be a
moment
bit
where
of shudder.
cameras go everywhere, and we'll rectify that shortly.
So I'll put us
Excellent.
on a little holding screen. Guys can get a drink and stretch it.
Yeah,
back in a
that'll
few
be
minutes.
good. Yes.
good intermission. So,
Because I'm too scared to press that before.
It's all right. All right.
So everyone,
We'll see you in a few
around.
minutes.
We're gonna take a quick few minutes break, and we'll be right back with more Roll to Chat.
Right. You
Are we back on board, Phyllis?
I think so.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. This is Roll to Chat. This is our in the spot where we usually have our one shot. However, just while I'm talking, I am about to sneeze, but we'll deal with that when we get to it. We are currently involved in a bit of a GM chat / TTRPG chat. For those that have been here the whole time, you'll notice Ellen is no longer here. However, we do have Chris back, and Chris rounds out the members of Roll to Cast, as it were. So yeah, Chris, this is just a space where we're going to be chatting all things GMing and all things to do with TTRPGs, but just for the fine folks at home sitting on their chairs or maybe listening in the car without watching with their eyes, of course. Who are you? What do you got going on? And yeah, a bit about yourself.
I'm Chris. I'm a part of Roll to Cast. Chris, not Ellen. Thank you, Phil. On the screen there. I am a dungeon master. I've been playing role-playing games for 20 years plus now. Definitely 20 years plus. How long?
You're the same age as me. You're 32.
25 years now. 25
Yeah.
years. This is the 25th anniversary for me since I was 8. And
When's the Blu-ray come out?
Special features.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been playing role-playing games for like 25 years now. I am a theatre director by trade and a high school teacher by day, and I'm directing a bunch of shows in the Adelaide Fringe. And I just performed with the Roll to Cast team last night, and I've got an opera that I'm directing coming out soon. It's weird, it's strange, it's a very odd opera, and it's very cool in that respect. Yeah.
Also, contextually, for those that were listening at the beginning, Chris is the only one of us that didn't engage in drinking because Chris was a GM, and at least one of us needs to be unimpeded. So yeah, Chris is fresh and doing great.
Chris fell asleep on the couch last night when he got in at 2 a.m. And Chris's boyfriend tried to rouse him from his slumber, literally screaming at me. Apparently, is that what happened? Shaking, screaming. I would not move. So I was out for the count.
I'm wondering what actually ended up getting you awake then. Was there slapping involved? Was there
cold water dousing you?
A couple of times? Yeah. Big shakes.
Big shake time.
Yeah, so I'm a bisexual guy. Pronouns are he, him. And I'm in Ghana land. I'm in South Australia, Adelaide. And yeah, that's pretty much about me.
Well, Chris, I'm actually going to cycle back and just ask one particular question that I'm very intrigued about that I asked the others.
Yeah.
In terms of your approach to GMing, and especially as you've said, you've been doing it for 20, 25 years now, so you've had a kind of a lot of time to practice kind of what works for you, what doesn't. Have you been able to identify both a strength in your GMing and also a weakness that you find in your GMing? And if so, with the weakness, do you find that it is something that you double down and really tackle in terms of trying to improve it? Or do you look at kind of doing the smokescreen and not focusing on it as much and focusing on the things that you are good at?
I try to avoid it. And what I try and do is I try to get the players to solve it for me. So I know that it's a weakness of mine. And I know players really love it. So I try and fill it. And that is detailed NPCs and like all of their kind of backstory. People love knowing that the NPC has a lived backstory and that sort of thing. I don't kind of keep that in my mind terribly much. And so when someone says, is that the character we met from blah, blah, blah ago? And they had that, are they related to this character or something like that? I just go, yep. And
absolutely.
Well observed.
That was pretty clever.
Wow, that's really insightful. And they go, did you plan that? And I go, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think my strength comes from, so I did LARP. I ran stories for like 25, 35, 45 player LARPs. So I was the kind of lead storyteller. The biggest one I did was in Adelaide for the end of world kind of convention for a Vampire the Requiem LARP, where I think we had 60 players, 70 players. And that was hard, but the strength that I have is that I can roll with anything. I barely make notes, and every season of Roll to Cast barely has notes for me when I'm the DM.
I make like a little Bible that I go through.
Yeah,
And Chris is like,
learnt
oh, I
through
have this
laughing.
card here. This is my notes for 10 hours
Chris,
to play.
Chris gave us such an realistic expectation of me when I first started GMing, because I was like, "Hey, Chris, what do you do?" And what Chris showed me, I was
the
like,
wrong thing.
and then I went to Phil. I'm like, "Hey, what do you do?" It's like the Mama Bear, Papa Bear thing. I'm like, "This one's too hard. This one's too soft. What's my process?" It's neither of these things.
Yeah. So I ran our 3-hour last show of Avatar Legends with 4 cue cards. I think it was 5 cue cards, with maybe 8 words written on them. And that's all I kind of need, because I can spin the wheels really fast and my brain kind of keeps up. But that does mean that when things like, oh, we want to go back to this place, or tell me more and give me huge amounts of detail, that kind of gets let the wayside. And that might also because I am your local murder hobo, as the Rottercast team. Of all the players, I'll be the one who's like, bring it on. Let's just kill these guys. Who cares? This is clearly a combat scene.
We did discuss that, yes.
No, good. I know. I'm seeing. Thank you.
I think I realized I didn't answer the question as well. I think for myself, a clear weakness is actually one that is kind of similar to Zach, what you said. I think for me, it's descriptions and describing worlds and really kind of painting a visual and verbal picture for people. I really struggle with that. I find I have a huge inability to grab words as I need them, and if I do grab them, they're not used in their proper context. In fact, I'm pretty sure I used a word to Phil yesterday in the car. I said excavating instead of evacuating, and I said it with such confidence.
It always takes me a second. I'm like, I think that's the wrong one.
And often I'll just be like, they probably know what I meant. I'm not going to correct myself. Then they'll correct me, and I'm like, that's fair.
I think it's actually charming, personally.
I like to think so.
Yeah.
But I really struggle with visual descriptions, and I'll listen to a Chris and a Phil, just kind of seemingly effortlessly, just weave this like grandscaping, this like grand landscape and this amazing visual representation. I go, why isn't that fucking easy? Why isn't it easy for me? So I will. So, and in Pulp Cthulhu, which was the first season that I was involved with for Rollcast, I struggled immensely with that, and I felt I dropped the ball on it. And then when Starfinder, the time came around like 2 years later to do Starfinder, I was like, right, I'm going to write paragraphs upon paragraphs of what this is and what is there and what it smells like. And there was no greater feeling than having Phil just go,
yeah, I was just immersing myself. It was great.
I was like, fucking yes, I did it.
Got him.
And so, and that's a thing where I go, what is my weakness? Okay, I'm going to lean in on it and try to better myself with it. Because also I think that's just a good exercise for me to do, to see if I can improve in those things. Because it's a skill, like anything else with GMing.
You can write, like, I think DMs as well, like, one of the things I do is I write set pieces. Like, I try to keep them, like, down, like, so it's not, I don't take up huge chunks of the session, but like I like to write, and sometimes I write a bit of a set piece and it can serve as a really good like watershed between like a new location or a new chapter in the story. It can really get players like immersed before you let them go. It's like an intro cutscene or something, I guess, to give it like, video game terms. And people don't hate cutscenes, they love cutscenes, even though, they're not playing them, but they give people like they settle people into something, and I think people, not everyone wants to do that kind of writing, but yeah, some of that stuff where I have an intricate description of a place or a person, it's because I sat down for a while and I was like, what's a really poetic, evocative way to bring this to the players so that when it's their turn, they have a real good sense of it, I think. So yeah, that was kind of my advice to Sean. It's like, just pre-write stuff. It's fine. It's fine. Just don't overindulge, and it'll really help.
Well, that's it, and it's also that I think conversely, the strength that I have is I love, unlike Chris, fuck, I love a good NPC, and I love like having that like background in that world. I'm like, I will sit here and I'll roleplay bullshit with you for as long as you want to. The entirety of the Pulp Cthulhu campaign just was us avoiding the narrative for a little while. Because I'm like, you keep engaging with people, I'll keep throwing people at you. I love this shit. You want me to do more voices? I'll do more voices. That's fine. We don't need to roll anything. Because if they're engaging with it, they're excited by it, and there's like there's actual there's energy that they're putting towards you and your ability to create something that makes them feel that they want to engage with the space. So why deprive them of that? And especially with something like Roll to Cast, where I'm like, well, look, if I do it too much, I can just edit it out. It's fine. I never do, but I could. And that's the role that I have as editor that that I engage with most, the ability to not leave things on the cutting room floor. But yeah, and I think that's kind of that's the strength that I hold. I think I'll use that to pivot onto another question in terms of Zach, I'll ask you specifically because I know that the three of us have obviously Roll to Cast is about different systems primarily. Have you engaged much, or do you have time to engage much with systems outside of D&D, or where has kind of your experience and expertise lied with other TTRPGs, if at all?
I've played I play in a pretty consistent Call of Cthulhu game. Played a bunch of Call of Cthulhu.
Oh yeah,
We did a whole stretch of it actually for our podcast as well.
Mm.
I mostly engage with other systems, mostly through like other podcasts and stuff like that, because I don't get the opportunity to play. Like I'm, a very classic like forever DM. Like I'm the DM in all of my circles usually, and so don't get to play a lot, and so end up DMing just a lot of D&D 5th edition. But I definitely listen to a lot of other stuff, and I definitely liberally steal from everything and jam it into 5th edition in whatever ways I can. Blades in the Dark is such a great system, and their ability to so it's like a very much like a heist simulator in many ways, and their flashback of being
the
players
retroactive
being able to,
heist, yeah.
yes, being able to have your players be like creative and narrative control to be like, okay, I'm gonna like. So often when I have a heist in my D&D games, I'll give them either as some magical device or make it narrative. Like, you're planning this, we're gonna cut ahead to the heist, and because you guys have planned it, we'll be able to cut back, and you can tell me once during this heist how you planned for a problem. And players really engage with that. They really like the ability to have sort of a bit more of a say. That and like I really like the system of dice rolling from Edge of the Empire, which is like they have those weird dice pools.
Oh, this is the Star Wars
The
Age of
Star
Empires?
Wars one, yeah.
Yeah,
The
they've
dice,
for those who haven't played it, they have very specific dice that you have to
yes,
use,
yeah,
that are very colorful.
very colorful, and you create a dice pool based on like the the benefits you have as well as the negatives. The DM can use force die to like change stuff, but I like it because it ends up being a kind of multi-layered conclusion to the roll. So it's like, oh, I didn't succeed at that roll, but I got a crit and an advantage. So while I didn't succeed at the thing that I'm doing, I still have some momentum, and I can kind of like, and with the DM, you kind of decide what that looks like. Or maybe you did succeed, but you have 3 disadvantages. So you
Yeah,
kind of like describe that, and it becomes like a really interesting thing.
negotiation
So
of sorts.
yeah, so in D&D, I've tended to, now when people fail a roll, like I just had this situation happen where they're like the tiny rabbit folk, they're on an airship and it was like coming out of control, and the ship's wheel was like spinning uncontrollably, and he's like went to grab it, and so I had him roll a strength check that he failed, and so I was like, okay, you get to choose. You can either just try and hold it and it slips out of your grasp, and you don't get to do it, or you can hold it but something is gonna break. And he's like, what? And so he like it was spinning around, and he grabbed it, and it was like pushing him down to the ground, and he ended up breaking a leg, and so gave him disadvantage until he got healed, and like it gives players more choice. I like doing that because they also have that in Blades in the Dark, the
The
what
kind
they
of
call
fail
it, a
forward
deal
principle.
Fail forward.
fail forward, and
Yes,
they
it's
have like
definitely
a deal with the
a deal.
devil or something. Like
Yeah.
the GM can the game master can offer like a a deal with the devil or something. It's called something
You can
like
do
that.
this, but this happens.
Yeah,
Yeah, success at a cost. Yeah.
yeah, which is
Yeah.
really really cool.
kind
So
of,
if you had
steal.
infinite time,
Mm.
or D&D didn't exist, like what would you love to do?
I would
to
love
run?
to run an Edge of the Empire game. I have a whole campaign set out. I have like all of the things that I want to do. I want to keep it completely away from like Jedi and Sith, and just
Yeah,
have
because you
like
can do Force and Destiny, which is a Jedi specific game. You can do Edge of
Yeah.
Empire, which is more like Rebels and Rapscallions. And there's the
Yeah.
third one, which I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember what that is.
But
But
yeah, so you would
yeah.
stick to like a more ground level Andor style story.
Yes, and maybe have people who are in the story Force sensitive, but not like directly, and more have it as this like kind of mysterious, creepy religion. Because it all started with me and a friend talking about how like terrifying it would be being hunted by a Jedi, and like it'd be great to like you think you shoot a cable or whatever, and the platform they're on disappears, and you're like and then they just like like fly up towards you. You close a bulkhead door, closing yourself between them, and you're like, I'm safe, and then a lightsaber pierces through.
You're just being chased by a wizard cult, really.
Yeah, people who can like change your friends' minds and mind control your friends, and like to turn against you, and it's terrifying. It's so terrifying. And if you didn't know any of that, if you didn't have that knowledge, it would be so creepy. And so I really want to set a game where the Force and Jedi and Sith are all like very very tertiary influences in the story that are unsettling. But mostly it's about like a crew trying to keep their ship together kind of
Yeah.
thing.
What about Phil and Chris? What about you? What is a game or a system? Actually, yeah, let's try that. What is a game that you have not played and would love to get your hands on to run, whether it's just like a little one shot or a more prolonged thing? Is there a game that you haven't played that you would like to or intrigued by?
So I
Phil,
know
take this one
about
first.
Blades in the Dark, but I haven't run it. So I would love to actually do that. I love a heist, as I said earlier. So I would love to play medieval heist simulator. I feel like the style of storytelling is one that appeals to me as well. It's a negotiation between the player and myself. And there's also some games that I like all these games that are kind of appearing recently that like let you play with kind of properties and stuff that you may be like very familiar with, but like didn't have a cool game yet. So there's like a Blade Runner one that's investigative. There's an Alien one.
Alien.
These are franchises
I did
that I
actually
love.
get to play a one shot in the Alien system. It was super fun.
Yeah,
I've got the
yeah.
Power Rangers TTRPG behind me. It
Yo.
looks amazing, and I can't wait to run it.
What about you, Chris? What's your dream game?
I don't know. Lance is up there because I haven't
yeah.
played it yet, and my friend was the editor for it. What else? All the game, like I've played Blades in the Dark. I found it really well. The group found it really hard because they came from a D&D background exclusively,
Right.
and could not fathom that they could just rewind time. So the concept of just diving straight in was not something they could do because they wanted to plan everything out. So the actual like planning a heist really cleverly goes out the window. You don't plan out the heist very cleverly. You do that while you're doing the heist retroactively.
Yeah.
You say how clever
flashback.
you were. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
You were clever in response to challenges. So that it's a really interesting thing. But I don't know. Yeah, Lance is probably up there. I'd like to play Root.
Oh, yeah.
Based on the board game? Yeah.
Yeah. I'd also like to. Oh, bye, Hannah. Hope you have a good night or day wherever you are in the world. I'd like. Yeah, I think that.
I think for myself, like yes, like, I've got a whole slew of games here that I've got because I like if Ellen's obsession is dice, my obsession is core rulebooks. I love them. I have a bunch of them, and I know I'll never probably. Well, Robscast allows me to play them, but it's just harder to find the time to binge through a book enough to then feel confident enough to play it. I recently got to do one of my bucket list items when I ran a one shot of the Firefly RPG.
Oh, cool.
love the universe so much, and I really enjoyed that dice system. It's quite similar to it had some DNA with the 2D20 system that we've been playing around with Dune recently. But I think the game that I would love to do is a 2D20 system, which is Star Trek Adventures. I find myself, weirdly enough with me, I hate crunch, or I'm not great at crunch. Yet the games that I constantly pick are the crunchiest. It's because I always engage with the world first. And I am enamored with Pulp Cthulhu, and I'm enamored with Starfinder, and they are just filled with crunch and rules. And I'm happy to
see
do
the
that.
Star Trek book. It's massive.
You say that.
It's
Like,
so
where is
big.
this bullshit
It's
right
so-
here?
It's so big.
It is absolutely chunky. And this is just one book of like 10 that you could, if you want. There's a book this size dedicated to each quadrant that you can play in. It's just huge, and I want to play it.
We should get you playing Shadowrun. That's crunchy as fuck. That's awful.
And
too
Shadowrun
much
looks
as a punishment
fun.
for you.
It's like, hey,
It's not,
there you
though.
go.
Is that you'd like it? You'd like
It
the
looks
setting.
fun,
You're like, here's this
but it
great book.
isn't.
You'd hate it, but you'd love the setting. So,
Yeah, the setting's wonderful. The game is a mess, hot mess.
50 D6, rolling them all at the same time.
Oh, it's like, speaking of Blades in the Dark, and you were talking about Infinite Time, the thing I really wanted to do a little while ago is adapt Blade in the Dark, because there's a setting as a part of the system, but adapt it to be like Arcane from the series and set
right.
it in Piltover, and like, because there's
Oh,
that
yeah.
perfect like the undercity of like criminals, and then like planning heists to go into the upper cities and stuff. I was like, oh, if I had again Infinite Time.
There is a game that does that.
Oh yeah.
It's not that setting, but it's very similar. It's like almost lifted from it. Let me see if I can't find it. But yeah, there's a game where it's like like clearly delineated kind of
The
ascension,
undercity,
ascension
overcity
sort of-
kind of
yeah,
deal.
yeah,
Right, right.
It's very interesting.
I always
This is
thought.
funny,
I think
play
it exists now, but I always thought when I was first getting into role playing that Stargate makes like a perfect RPG, and I'm sure it exists by now.
It does. It's actually at one of our local game stores currently.
Because you have like these small teams that go planet to planet. They have different specialties. You have like the archaeologist, the combat guy, the biologist. You could have a medic. There's like classes already inbuilt. Small teams. It's mission based. You go to different locations, have different problems to solve. It's like the show is almost like an RPG structure already. So I think that game would be like perfect. Also, Stargate's like the best. I love it.
You know, I've only ever watched one episode, and that's the one that you introduced.
This is
to me.
what I brought for the little showcase of favorite episodes of TV. Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, Chris, you were going to say something.
No, I was
else?
going to say, Zach, have you played Alice is Missing?
No.
Alice Missing, a very interesting game.
It's a game that you can't really you can to a point, but you also kind of just have to go in relatively blind. But I think what's so fascinating about Alice is Missing is it's never going to be the same as the first time you play it. I feel it was such an experiential game that we had the benefit of playing us as Rollcast. We had one of our friends of the pod, and in our Discord, they ran Alice is Missing. It's basically purely a non-verbal game. Usually you have either phones with you and you roleplay purely through that, or in our case, we had a Discord server. And you have links to each other player, like separate servers, and you also have a group chat, and the premise happens, and you can only converse through messaging.
And it happens over 90 minutes. So, and there's what you do is you put a video on that you start at the same time, and it has a soundtrack that builds over the 90 minutes to give like a texture to the game. And the GM kind of feeds you events, which you then discuss in the different private chats and the group chats. So it's very innovative, and
I cried.
So cool.
yeah, it's really affecting.
It's stunning.
Super intense.
Yeah.
Yes.
You need a
Also,
bit of, like, there are triggers in it, and you need to like read them. But
Right.
Yeah, but if that's something that you're okay dealing.
Did they just expand it, or are they working on expansion?
they have recently. They had
just
like a little
expanded.
expansion for it.
Yeah.
Because I
no
bought
idea
the
if
base
it's
game
good
for
or
a
not.
friend.
I think they deepened the pool of events and stuff that can happen.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
Yeah. So it's
Also,
great.
just as an answer to your question, so there was, Phil, a Stargate SG-1 game from a while back that got discontinued. However, like I said, they recently made another one, which was backed and is now in stores, and it's based on the 5th Ed OGL. So it uses the OGL system.
Oh, Burning Wheel is really crunchy.
Oh,
I really love
yeah,
that
Burning
game.
Wheel's great. I like Burning Wheel.
Yeah. I'd also love to play Shadow Scar, the new Tales Orion game.
Yes,
They're releasing soon, I hope.
which is
Multiversal
going to be
ninjas.
which is going to be based. It's not going to be interlock entirely. I think as far as that they've said it's not going to be. But there's obviously, I think with all Artesorian products, there's all DNA within it.
Zach, have you heard of this one?
No.
It's you play as Naruto characters, ninjas, with magic,
yeah.
and you travel through different dimensions, trying to solve space-time fight. You fucking dimension hop between every archetypal kind of city. There is a steampunk city. There
That's sick
is
as hell.
Medieval Japan City.
Medieval Japan City.
Yeah.
Right.
There's like a super hippy dippy place.
Solar
it's the
punk kind of
most.
stuff.
There's like a noir America. That's
Cool.
perpetually in like a noir kind of tone. Jazz will never die.
Yeah.
And
It's like Nicolas Cage in Spider-Verse, like the noir Spider-Man. Yeah.
It's a lot like that. It's super cool.
There's also I've been wanting to play Rogue Trader
Rogue
again, like
Trader's
big
amazing.
chunky book.
Yeah.
But like the idea, because I had some friends that were in a campaign and they were talking about this and being like, your character just is kind of useless and like you're just a farmer, so you don't really have necessarily relevant skills to whatever you're doing, but you get drawn into it. You just have to kind of survive, and then you'll probably die, and then you'll like at least that's how they were playing it. I thought that was a really cool idea.
Have you played Dark Heresy?
Oh, yes.
No.
Dark
Warhammer.
Heresy, Warhammer 40k.
It's similar to Rogue Trader, but maybe like a little bit more focused. Rogue Trader is like a very open.
Step down in terms of power level.
Yeah. Rogue Trader is like you have a bit more license to kind of do what you want in the world. Whereas Dark Heresy, you're like, you are my underlings. You are expendable pawns. This is what you're doing. Go do it.
Yeah, and you go, okay.
We've played it twice for one shots, and I think I've been the sole survivor twice.
Yeah. We do a good Dark Heresy game.
I think I might bridge this onto another question I was going to ask, just because we could talk about the games we love all day.
Yes.
And that is so fun. In terms of GMing, obviously, well, not obviously, but would I be right in assuming that we have all GM for groups that have been mixers or we have played with both experienced role players and first timers or people that have come in new? I want to focus on playing with new players and what that experience is like for you, because for me personally, I absolutely adore and love and get very excited whenever I'm playing with new players, because I love to see what they bring to the table, and more to the point, how they, like, in the most loving, best possible way, can fuck things up and really flip it on its head. And how they engage with the world is so fascinating, because sometimes you can just forget. Like, because if you're a practiced role player, or for example, with like Roll to Cast, for example, we kind of know how each other operate, so we know how to work together in service of whatever story the GM storyteller is trying to tell. Whereas first-time players don't really have that skill or desire to do so. So, what has kind of been your experience playing with new players, and do you relish that opportunity, and how do you engage with it? What do you find the experience is as opposed to working with established role players?
I think it depends on the mix of players that you've got around the table. Because as much as you can have a good time, I've run games with new players and experienced players, and I've run games where I've been new to the table, but there are experienced players and there are new players at that table, and the experienced players will set the tone pretty quick. That's been my experience, and that led to a not great D&D game at one point, where, loot everything. How many feet away is this? Non-description of anything. It became very kind of like
trying to screw the GM up.
Yeah,
sort
a
of
little
thing.
bit. A little.
They were sort
player
of
versus
so they were sort of in
GM
their
and
rut, and the
very
new players had to
militant
like
about
fall
the
in.
playstyle. And exactly, so the other players don't really get a chance to explore the other version of that. And I guess that's true for the alternative, right, where lots of role playing is happening, and that player really is just there. The new player is just there to
Yeah.
roll some math rocks and count some numbers and deal some damage.
Well, Chris, I think with you, I'm very interested by this question as well, because I know twice now, with me specifically, if you recall, you've run some games for me and others where none of us had played before. So you've played with tables that are pretty much exclusively first-time players, and especially if someone that has had multiple years of experience, how you found that process.
That's the best. That's the best, because either you're modeling best behavior or the table is setting a kind of tone for themselves and discovering it as a group. And that's fun. That's really good. A mix of old and new players, particularly when it's a lot of old players and like one or two new players, is the worst in my experience. Particularly if you haven't played with that group. If it's well established and you're bringing someone new into the fold, that's completely fine, I suppose. But if it's like at an event, and you have at a con, and there are maybe 3 old players who know each other or are just of a particular play style, whether it's roleplay heavy or combat heavy, and there is a new player there who's never played before, you better hope that their positive coming from
They're a giving table.
is exactly what the other 3 are going to give. Because if those 3 players are roleplay people and the other person just wants to do combat, it's not going to work. If vice versa, it's not going to work. And you can't. Everyone comes to the table with their own expectations. So cons are really hard for that. Conventions are really hard for that.
I do really like having one experienced person at the table with multiple other new people, where it's like one person. So if there's it's the kind of thing where when you're playing a board game and you're like, we'll play one round and then you'll get it kind of thing. It's like you explain the situation, they're like, I kind of get it, and then once you're in it and you can throw something to the experienced player, like, what do you do? And they describe what they do, and so the other players are like, oh, that's what we do. But it's still not an overpowering presence, so the new players can kind of still set what the group activity is.
They function as mentor in those situations.
Yes. Yeah.
Because you can guide as a GM, but you're not on their side of the table. So it's nice to have someone that can guide them as a player.
And you don't want to be it's so easy as a DM for new players, I've found, to they'll if they're struggling to know what to do, to be like, you can do this and you can do this, and kind of start feeding them different things. And it's that's I'm like this because I constantly want to fill in someone's feeling of anxiety or feeling of oh, I don't know what's going on. So I constantly will just put the floorboards in front of them so they don't feel like they're about to slip. But I think if they can see other people being a bit more active and a bit more bold in their choices, they can be like, oh, well, I can do that as well, and let's do it.
Phil?
I mean, I kind of want to bounce off that into one group I have played with a long time ago. One of the people in there was fairly new, but they also had some chronic illness problems. So I know a lot of people often play with sort of neurodivergent people and their expectations. This wasn't quite that, but it was kind of similar because they had a chronic pain issue. Their level of engagement could fluctuate through the game. And what they did is they ended up using a system of indicators, and this is sometimes also used for neurodivergent people. It's basically a thing you can flip over to be yes, I'm very engaged. I don't feel so hot, or I need some time, away off spotlight. Thank you. And they had just a visual thing that they could basically put in front of them that basically told me how engaged they were. And I think that can be kind of cool for people, especially if they're new and kind of want to do it, but they're really nervous. You can give them a way to be actually, I'm not ready to step into the spotlight yet, or actually, hey, put me in, coach. And I think giving people that kind of control without having to verbally say it can give people a bit more of a safety net if they are new and nervous. So yeah, that's the thing I would like to implement for new players a bit more.
It kind of draws me on to another question I had, which is around as you've gone through GMing and such, and we talk about like the things that work and what we like about new players and such like that. To put a more broader scope on it, can you pinpoint, or can you think, if not a favorite, a particular highlight moment for you as a GM? It could be something that for you goes, oh, this is really reaffirming for me as a GM, something that I did well, or something that the table you're with responded fantastically to, whether in the moment or afterwards. Just something that you can point to as a positive highlight or experience for you as a GM in a game.
I'd say my. Well, sorry, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Just a like in general, like a really good moment that you.
Yeah, something that kind of encapsulates a positive experience for you that you kind of you can pinpoint as like a favorite moment for you while being as a GM rather than as a player.
Yeah, I recently had this campaign where I played with these people for ages. I know them very well. We're all friends. We've been, streaming and stuff. We're all like of a type. And one of the things that I know about myself as a GM is that I very softball combats and encounters and stuff. I find it really hard to find that balance of like challenging, especially because my players themselves are on different engagement levels with the crunchiness of the system. So you don't want to like steamroll some players. They feel like they're completely overwhelmed, and the others like are trying to engage with it. So I tend to softball it, but I wanted to have a situation where they were constantly like it's this very much like this is my campaign that I base entirely off the Mummy, essentially. So there's this rival group of like they're both kind of like trying to find artifacts, and there's this not rival like essentially Nazis. I do ridiculous German accents. They're all elves who wear dark uniforms, but they had been dunking on them the entire time and like pulling off really great heists on them. And I was like, these people are smart. They would try and do the reverse. They would try and ambush the party. And so I set it up. I left a few clues. But my point was like, I'm gonna overwhelm them with like a bunch of people. It's gonna be unfair, and I'm gonna capture them. I'm not gonna just try and kill them, but I'm gonna they had this huge automaton that was like picking up unconscious people and putting them inside it. And I was like, leading up to that session, I was like, I'm not sure if they're gonna fucking hate this and like be like
It's unfair.
infuriating. Because it would suck. There's totally the argument that it would suck to have just like thing happen. But when it came to it, and they were like, oh shit, like people were going down, people getting like put into this like cage automaton. Two of them realized what was happening. One of them, like, because they were on this ship and it was like lighting on fire. There's all these fire bombs going off, and they were like climbing up the mast, and they were realizing what was happening, seeing their friends go down, leapt off the ship like in this like incredible dive. And then when it got to the end of the session, they were like, that's the best session we've ever had. And I was like, good.
My anxiety gone. Thank you.
Yeah. Like they were so into it. After I was like very unsure about it, and they were like so far in the positive. And so like it made me a little bit more bold in like making very big choices that deeply affect the party. Instead of just like doing what I do a lot, which is just like very pulp, big action, fun sequences that they end up pretty much the same at the end of it. Like making
You gotta have a bit of disaster, a bit of
a disaster. Yeah.
So for me, I think for the podcast, we did The Witcher was my third campaign, and the kind of the conclusion of The Witcher for me was just like such a good interplay between myself and these two were were the focus of it. I try not to spoil it for people because
I'm loving
if you haven't listened to
the
it,
words at the moment.
if you haven't listened to it,
fucking hard to fight.
Yeah.
Avoid saying anything.
But like, I had some great off the cuff descriptions in that, not pre-prepared stuff, and I was like, wow, okay, where did I come up with that? That's pretty good. So myself, I felt like I was on form, and then these two were like absolutely knocking out of the park. I don't want to give too much away, but there was player conflict, and that was handled so well, and it was so intense. And the end of the session, the conclusion of the story, we were just all like,
I cried.
we have
I
to
cry
sit
a
with
lot,
it.
apparently.
Sorry, you cry a lot. You cried at that one too.
Yeah.
You just have to. It's that same feeling where you just kind of sit with it and go, "Wow, that was something else," and everyone just sort of is looking at each other and go, "Wow, that we just did that." That for me is one of the highlights of GMing. Like that shared kind of like awe of like, oh, we just pulled that off. Not like we pulled off an amazing heist or whatever. Like we pulled off this storytelling that is just gonna sit with us and affect us for a while. And yeah, I felt that way as a player when we played Die recently, but as the GM and like facilitating that and being the architect makes me super proud. Yeah.
I'm just ducking out for 15 seconds. So, Chris, this is not an indication of me not wanting to hear what you have to say, but please start your moment.
You've heard it before, I'm sure. I ran 2 games of Dark Heresy. And Dark Heresy, as we mentioned, you're serving an Inquisition.
Right.
You work at the behest of a boss, and you have to investigate, bad things. I ran 2 games of it simultaneously, and it took the players a long time. One was they weren't working for the same person, and one was sent to investigate the other. And so I'd take from one game their entire actions, and the next team would chase them. And both teams were aware that they were pursuing an enemy group, like this one, and the other was aware that someone was pursuing them. But it was kind of in the background. It was always like weeks later. And then finally I brought, I think it was 10 or 12 players to a same meeting table. And I was like, hey, you've been playing in each other's games.
That's awesome.
This is you. And you finally caught each other.
Now
This ends with some of you leaving the table and some of you not. This is it. So they found each other, and so this like, you're the guy who was doing this. Holy fuck, you've been doing this. Why do you keep doing that? What happened there? It was amazing. That was a lot of fun. That was a big moment. And I also think one from the podcast was Phil losing at Ellen and me. In our Vampire the Masquerade game, I sowed so much paranoia into.
I Phil got paranoid as fuck.
Well, and it was also like a delusion of my character, so mechanically
Yes.
I was being supported as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
You started suffering. Your character started suffering from paranoia, but you, as a player, genuinely thought that Ellen and I had concocted
A
an
meta narrative.
entire plan
Yeah.
against you, the player. And
Because I thought it would make an awesome twist.
Yeah. And I kept giving Ellen little like nods and little like, so anyway, you do this. And she's like, oh, okay. And Phil was observing it, being like, what the fuck is happening? What are you doing? So that was a big moment as well, where you were actually, like, I think from memory, and Sean, back me up because my memory isn't great, you stood up from the table.
Yeah, no, Phil was pacing up and down for a little bit.
Yeah.
Back then we were recording. We didn't have this studio that we have now, so we were recording in my room.
Yeah.
So it was just my bed's behind me and this little small room, and Phil's just pacing. And by that point, like, it's starting to get a little bit darker outside. It was great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
it
was a
totally
good
bled over to me. I was like, my character got paranoid, and then I was like, this is something Chris would do. He would
Yes.
totally like have a layered in betrayal like before it ever started.
Yes, and I do have a shit-eating grin. Again, from playing Vampire the Masquerade.
God, you have a punchable face
I
right now.
do, honestly. I have the biggest punchable face in the world.
I have two. I'll have one that's Rollcast related, just because branding. But also is one of my favorite
That's
moments.
what I did, but I didn't say it, Sean.
This is generally one of my favorite moments with Starfinder, the season that I did for Rollcast. My second one, so I felt much more confident in my ability. By that point, I've been GMing for a number of years. By that stage, unlike Pop Cthulhu, where it was my first foray into it, and I had this expectation of myself going, right, all I want to do is, I knew from the very beginning, before I really had much of a grasp on the story, because at that point I had the characters. I asked for the characters first, and I would try and build a story out of that base. I wanted to make someone the clear protagonist. And then once I had that and had everyone else's players, I went, oh, I would love to have this person as the antagonist, because that's clearly the way it's heading. You know what? I really want this particular moment to happen in the end. I crafted the entire season around just getting to one moment. And it could have completely fallen on its fucking head if one of them died, because death is on the table. What do I do in that case? That's for future Sean to figure out. And it was just going, can I, as like a weird challenge for myself, can I craft a story that ends exactly here? And is it going to be engaged with and felt in the same way that I'm hoping it will? And it did. And that was such a reaffirming place for myself as a GM to know that I could do that. But also it's indicative of the players being willing to go along for the ride and like pick up what I'm putting down and then to engage with it in such a way, because usually you don't always have that, because players aren't beholden to your narrative. They don't have to pick up the pieces that you're there. In fact, they may just not see it. So to have that was very kind of like enriching as well. But outside of a broadcast context, I had a weird experience where I got to run a game that I had been a player for. So when Phil was the one that it was my first proper like campaign that I got to do, and we did the Lost Mines of Phandelver, which is the introductory campaign for D&D 5th Ed. And so I only got that as experience as a player. So when I had my casual game that I started with, which was one seasoned player and 3 newbies, essentially, I was like, oh, how cool would it be to do Lost Mines of Phandelver? I kind of know it. And I'll just get the other side of it. First of all, got to see all the shit we fucked Phil on.
All the stuff he bypassed.
I was like, oh, wow. This whole castle has like 15 rooms that he obviously planned for, and we went into one.
Yep.
And ruined it.
Wild Shape Druid.
Yeah. I was like, man, Phil would have hated that.
Yeah, do you remember the session you did where he's just like, oh, I'm gonna wild shape and just gonna sneak in the back? And
We identified the room that had the main people in it, and we just went through there. Whereas my team went through the front door and did every single room. I was like, oh, that's actually a fun room. That would have been cool to engage with. Oh, there's a bugbear in there. That's fun.
Yeah.
But what I loved about that particular campaign is I put a big focus on, again, the players and them engaging with their backstory and bringing things that they want to have happen and want to explore. And they go, here, have this. We don't have an answer for it. We are happy for you to come up with answers for it. And it came towards the end of a season where I was able to successfully weave people's narrative threads and lost moments and deliver it in a satisfying way where I'm constantly jumping from character to character to character to character in this kind of TV show scene, flip, flip, flip. And I got to make a player cry. And that was lovely because we had an impromptu funeral scene where for Phil or for anyone that's played Lost Mines of Phandelver, Gundren, I think is his name, but he is a dwarf that meets an untimely end. I basically had a funeral for him and just did an off-the-cuff NPC eulogy and made one of my fucking players cry. And that to me was going, oh my god, I have players that are emotionally engaging with this story that we've spent months doing. Thank god they're still like engaging with it after all this time, and it's not just a slog to get to the finale or to the end of the story. It's like, cool. that's as much as I could hope for with the season, because I haven't made my roll to cast people cry yet. But also I do weird fucking stories. That's probably why. But yeah, that was mine. That's a long-winded way of saying that was the things that
I like making people cry.
I like
best.
Yeah, I like having people that are emotionally invested in the thing that I've crafted.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, we are heading towards the kind of the tail end of the conversation. I guess you know what? Let's end on a bit of a positive thing for 2024. Is there anything that people have as goals or things that they would love to engage with or do in terms of the TTRPG space? Is there a game you'd love to run? Is there a thing you'd love to do? Like, is there anything or is there something you'd like to do differently that you haven't before as a GM or even as a player in terms of the TTRPG space?
It's a good question, Sean.
So
Let me think.
we have Avcon coming back properly this year. It's been kind of disrupted. It's our anime and video games convention, but it also has a bunch of tabletop role playing that happens there. And when last time I had some wherewithal, I was going to run 2 games. I was going to Mouse Guard and Cyberpunk Red there, and that year it got cancelled because of COVID.
Yeah, because the convention puts out a call for GMs that would like to run games for convention goers there, and they're like, "Hey, what games would you run?"
I really want to do it this year, so like I really want to take on that challenge of doing something for strangers in a convention space and like selling some of my favorite non-D&D games to them, you know, and giving a bunch of different strangers like a taste for some of my favorite games or role-playing in general. That's what I'd really like to achieve. And I think you kind of hinted at it before, Chris, that convention setting is a really tough challenge to GM for. But I'm really
a good GM. Run at a convention.
I
will test you.
That's what I want to test. Yeah, I want to face that challenge. That's what I want to do this year. Yeah,
because it's not about how good a story you can craft or how complex it is entirely how can you get 5 complete strangers on side, collaborating, working together, as well as empowering them and ensuring that they all have a good time whilst not burning yourself out. It is we played in a con game recently, Phil. We had a 8-year-old with us. We had myself, who's been playing for 25 years. So I've been playing role-playing games. Actually, there were a number of people who are under the age of 25. So I'd been role-playing longer than they'd been alive.
That's crazy.
We had someone who was who had an intellectual disability, if I recall correctly. We had a huge variety of people, and so that DM had to work really hard. We made it easier by being good players, but there's every chance that we could have been absolute bastards, and not us as people, but if we weren't we were someone else. Could have been nightmare people to run a game with, and you have to run it. Cons are hard. Cons are the fucking test. That's the real shit. Also competing with all the noise of the convention around you.
Yeah,
it's tough.
Zach, what about you?
So I did a video that I released late last year called D&D. Essentially, I made a one-shot and replaced a D&D 5th edition one-shot, but replaced every role with some kind of physical or mental challenge. So I had a toy bow and arrow for when they shot a bow and arrow. For an intelligence check, I had like a Rubik's Cube that was like 2 moves from being solved. They have to solve in like a limited amount of time.
You did that at PAX, didn't you? Am I wrong with that?
So I did it again at PAX. Yeah, I did a video of it, like pre-recorded at Fortress, which was lovely. It's like a gaming bar that was like all set up like a tavern. It was bitch to film because it was the first time I properly like had to have a full camera set up, audio guy, everything set up, as well as like because we were doing all this like physical stand-up stuff. I had to have a setup that would enable us to be able to easily film and audio record that stuff when everyone was getting up from the table and doing that stuff. So it was hard and big, but it did really well. And then again, I did it on at PAX, which was really fun to do it on stage. But I want to do that more and bigger. Like I have all these ideas that um require a lot of funding. So that's going to be part of it, looking at grants and stuff. But I really want to do it like really big and like a proper like season of it, essentially.
One of
And
our
to be
chatters
clear,
says, "I
it's
love
called
D&D, but real." So.
it's D&D but real. That's what it's called, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, D&D but real. Can you find it online at all? Like the one you did at PAX? Is there a way to
Oh, the one at PAX,
Or at least the
or even
original.
your video actually? Because you did a video on it. So.
That video is up on my channel. If you go to Zac Speaks Giant
Sure.
on YouTube, it's the one that's like
The
on
pinned
the front
one?
page. Yeah.
Yeah. Dope. Because I got to see a little bit of it, and it's such a frighteningly awesome idea. It's like, oh, what do you?
Yeah,
I have
it's
to,
one of
I
those
have to
things
be
that
real world competent. Oh,
it's so much fun because it was like as soon as I had the idea, I was like, ah, someone must have done that before, and just like and constantly asking all the people that got involved. The people that got involved were awesome, by the way. Like, I was very lucky to play with like Jordan Rasco, Dale Kingsmill, Bones and Panda, and then Dale's friend Omar Najam, who has been on like Dimension 20 and Critical Role and stuff, just happened to
Okay.
be in the country when I asked Dale. So he was like, I'll join in, and I was like, please do. It was very exciting. But yeah, doing that on a bigger like with more planning and bigger, and like making that into a series is what I want to do. It might take me more than this year to do it, but that's
Get the ball rolling.
yeah.
What about you, Christopher Bond?
Oh, outing my full fucking name. That's
Your
good.
full name.
Yeah, I can't wait. My students keep trying to find me. I can't wait for them to discover the fucking podcast. Because it's just be swearing. They'll never
Yeah.
look at me the same way. Teaching's weird.
You'll look tame
As
compared to
someone-
me. It's all
as
right. I
someone new to it.
deliberately.
Yeah, maybe. It depends on how far back in the catalog they go.
Mm.
I think my goal is I would love to get a D&D podcast going, or maybe a Pathfinder podcast going, and do a really silly one. I always do kind of dramatic, dark stuff. That's kind of my whole brand. And I'd like to mix that up a touch. I've been listening to a lot of Dungeons and Daddies, and I think that's really inspired me in a lot of kind of creative ways. It's a silly premise, but then it gets quite dark as it goes along and quite serious. The daddies part is not just a joke. They do address like fatherhood, which is a really cool concept to dive into.
Yeah.
And I kind of like burying the lead a little bit in maybe some of the more mature content stuff I want to do. So yeah, I want to kind of do a D&D one or a Pathfinder one, have these fine folk involved, and maybe get a grant for it. It's money. Yeah, that's the big one. But yeah, trying to get a grant board to be like, oh yes, role playing games.
Yeah.
That's art.
Yeah.
Tricky business. But yeah, that's sort of my goal, is to release a new podcast and have wacky fun up front, and then twist
Then
the dagger.
Get him.
Slide the knife in.
Slide the
Yeah.
knife in. Yeah,
I think this is the second time Dungeons and Daddies has been mentioned today.
Yeah.
It really did reverse my opinion of like I've always been like a guy that's been like the world that I make as a DM is serious and the players get to be wacky, and
yes,
you know the world plays the straight man to the wacky players. But watching that podcast, I'm like, man, you could just be real silly all over the joint and then hit them with like a really serious moment, and it hits so much harder.
yeah.
Well,
And
it's
also
also that
stops
interesting
you-
thing of you go, Chris.
It stops you feeling the anxiety of maintaining that serious tone throughout. That's the thing that I always feel is like, oh no, my players are taking a bit silly. The emotional big things that will hit them won't matter as much. But I mean, last night we did a live show, and on top of like funny little asides and drinking jokes and me calling out my own father in the audience, being like, hey dad, you were late to this show, ha ha ha, and this sort of stuff. Phil was having an emotional scene where he's wrestling with his own character, his character's wrestling with his own fathers and disappointment and revenge, and becoming the enemy that he hates, kind of Luke Skywalker-y. but the silly wacky stuff doesn't take away from the seriousness.
And more to the point, I don't think it takes away from it. I actually think it highlights it a lot better sometimes when done right. Because I think, especially with something like Dungeons and Daddies, and also what we do with the live shows and what we've sometimes done with some seasons of the podcast, and I've seen on streams, is that it is so inherently silly. And it
We're playing
plays
pretend.
comedic effect, right? But it is engaging. You're engaging with the players are clearly engaging with it because they're comfortable enough to have fun and get those moments of levity. But also for the audience, they get to like fall in love and be charmed by these characters, so that when you do hit them with the moments of emotional turmoil, I think it's earned that much more because it really highlights those moments, and you're taken aback and you go, oh shit, that's right, there's like real stuff going on, there's still real stakes, and you now care about these characters and what they're going through because you're so engaged and attached to them at this point. And that's what Daddies, I think, does so extremely well. There's a moment like late in the first season where the GM and one of their players, you can just hear them crying for 2 minutes while they're improvising a scene. That's just an aside, and it hits so viscerally. And it's a culmination of all the work they've done up until that point. And if you don't have everything that comes before, I don't think it hits as hard.
Yeah.
Bring us home, Sean. What's your goal? What's your goal for the year?
Oh, I've got two. The most short-term one is to get through these live shows and have them be very successful. We had a really cool last night. We've got 3 more weeks to go, especially because my one's coming up next weekend. So I really just want to have one that, I mean, first of all, the people on stage that you really enjoy and love, but also I just want one that, like, because I think we do translate really well to a live show, and it's been fun to explore that and tweak that and fine-tune that. And we have 3 more weeks to kind of like, completely like sell out, have raucous crowds and people that come away like going, yeah, cool, I knew nothing about TTRPGs before, and now this might be something I want to do. Like, sure, one thing could be like, oh, what is Rollcast, or what is this podcast? But also, what is role playing? Can I get a book? Well, I'm here at the Lost Dice. Okay, I can pick up this book here. I have some friends that want to play. Cool. And if they play a game based on seeing us, that's fucking awesome. Like part of what we do. So that's kind of an extra aside to why we do what we do that I'd love to see more of. I think my goal for 2024 is because I'll be going back onto a Call of Cthulhu stream on the dreaded GM channel. And I just want to play with more people and do some more streaming and engage with other people, like get more into the TTRPG space here in Adelaide and nationally. Just like have opportunities to do more role-playing stuff, because I fundamentally like love it. It's a awesome creative outlet for me, and I want to like experience more people and styles of play and just engage with it on like a larger scale. Also, because I'm not working at the moment, so I need stuff to do, please. Yeah, and that's kind of me, I think. Just like kind of exploring TTRPGs in different mediums, I think, is kind of my goal. Outside of the stuff we do for Roll to Cast. Yeah. Well, look, that is pretty much us in a nutshell. And this is Roll to Chat that we've done. So as expressed through the circumstances outside of our control, we didn't get to do our regularly scheduled Roll to Cast live. It is still happening. We're going to pick a date very soon, and then we are still going to do our regularly scheduled program as voted on by the patrons of All Out of Bubblegum. It's gonna be wacky, it's gonna be silly, and it's just gonna be batshit insane. I have a very vague. We talked about preparing. I have 2 lines of prep, and the rest of it is just gonna be whatever, because it's a 1-page role-playing game, and also make sure you players get your sticks of bubblegum, because that's a required aspect of the game. But yeah, so until then, let's just quickly go around the table. If there's anything you want to plug, obviously, Zac, first and foremost, thank you so much.
Thank you, Zac,
for giving up your time and coming, and especially pivoting on the spot to this. It's kind of cool to hear like your insights and your thoughts and such. But where can we find you? What have you got going on, and what would you like to tell the fine people about Zac Speaks Giant?
Zac Speaks Giant, mostly YouTube, but I'm also on like TikTok and Instagram and stuff. But look at me on YouTube because that's where I get money. I have some like compilations and stuff come up, and as mentioned, the D&D but real stuff. Please check it out. I worked very hard.
Uh, Phil and Chris, is there anything? Obviously, we've got the live shows going on, but what have I missed in terms of kind of our own stuff? Well, Phil, do you want to talk about the current season?
Yes. So if you're just dropping in here and you're not sure what we do, we are a podcast, a tabletop role-playing podcast, and we play a different game every season. We are up to our 10th season, playing a different game, different person GMing. Currently, we are in the early stages of our Dune Adventures in the Imperium game, which I am running. Dune is like an absolute personal favorite of mine. Love the books, love the new movies. It's just a world I love to inhabit, and I think the players are having a great time having this world kind of made real for them. And diving into the kind of intrigue and politics of it. It's a bit of a different game for us in terms of it's not kind of heavy hijinks, not a ton of hijinks. It's a bit more mastermindy, and so yeah, I think it's turning out really well because we continue to try and do something different and fresh every season. So it's a great time to jump in if you're interested in Dune. If not, hey, we have 300 episodes plus of other stuff. You can jump in at any season you want. They're all self-contained.
Go through the list, Phil. List them all now.
List them all.
Go now, quick.
2020, Vampire the Masquerade, Cyberpunk Red, Pulp Cthulhu,
Yeah.
Kids on Bikes, The Witcher, then it's Chris again with my brain is shorting out.
What did we do last night?
Oh yeah, Avatar Legends, Starfinder, Die the RPG, and then Dune.
Well done.
Right.
It's commute friendly. We edit it to be like a nice tight half or an hour, and it has an original soundtrack, sound effects, and all that good stuff. It's mwah.
It's like an audio drama, but with role-playing games.
Yeah. Chris, is there anything I've missed out before I send us off on our merry way?
Nah. Thanks, Zach, for joining us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Zach.
good.
And yeah, everyone, please tune in and keep updated on our socials. Come on our Discord. We'll talk about when we're going to pop up Roadcast Live next. And also, yeah, if you like what we do, consider jumping on to the Patreon, as it were, because that's how we get money. Yeah, Matt, enjoy the rest of your weekend, everyone. Have a lovely...
Go watch Ellen's show. Go watch Ellen's stream.
Yeah.
Stream is on now.
Yeah, Winter's Tale.
Winter's Tale, yeah.
Yeah. I'll put in the chat. Done. All right.
All right. Have a lovely weekend, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.